In progress. All right. So, all right. Well, good morning. Welcome. My name is Joe Pendaco. I'm the Comp Council Chair for the MMEA, and welcome to this November 6th virtual PD Day. As of right now, we don't have anyone else in the session besides me and Mr. O'Connor, but there's been an issue this morning with the Zoom link that was sent out. So I had to just resend a new Zoom link. So it's going out now. So people may pop in and pop out during the session, but otherwise we're going to record this just so we can pop it up on the website and have this information out for teachers to view at their leisure when they want. So a little background on what's going on today, just so we're aware. The MMEA is trying to get out some PD to their membership, virtual PD this year, because we're still unsure about what's going to happen with the All-State Conference. And so this day came up as kind of a way to help get out some professional development to teachers virtually in a somewhat still uncertain time frame. And so that's how this part came up. And so there's a bunch of different sessions being offered today in various sessions on band and orchestra and chorus, and this is the session on composition. And so what we're doing today for comp is we're here to talk with local composer Jake O'Connor, and I'm going to be asking him some questions. And if anyone comes in and they might have some questions, we can do a little Q&A if need to as well. But the purpose of this session, I found, is that as educators, especially in the state, we do a great job of knowing how to prepare our students to go into various musical fields. We know what they may need to enter in as an undergraduate major in performance, say, or as music education, and even music theory or music history and those type of majors. We have a good idea of what students need to know to be prepared to enter into those majors, but we're not quite sure how to prepare our students to enter into being a composing major, being a composer. And so I decided to start with these what I hope to be a series in composer conversations. We interview various composers about their background, their experiences as a comp major, or their experiences learning composing, even if they weren't a particular major in college. Learn about their experiences in the world of composing and what they've learned and what they feel is important to learn, and what they've done, and kind of learn a little bit more about the composer's struggle, if you will, the composer's training, their experience, and what they've learned and how they go about doing their things in this effort to help us better help our students who may want to go into composing that way. And so that's why we're going to start today with this session with composer Jake O'Connor. Jake is a local composer. Some inside information: he was one of my students in Duxbury all throughout high school. Didn't learn until later on that he was interested in going into being a composer. So best we could, got him out there, and he went out and did it, and it was great. He's graduate of Ithaca College, their undergraduate program in composing, and then also did his master's at Peabody, and just graduated back in May. You said, Jake? Yeah. Yep. So he's just brand new out in the streets looking for jobs. Wink, wink. If you got any support for that too, he's out here looking for work, and he's a freshly minted composer from the hallowed halls of some great institutions we have here. And so we're going to talk to Jake today about his experiences, early on before college, his experiences in college, what he's learned, and how the program was, and what helped him out, and what he could have helped him to do better. And where he is now and what he's doing. So again, all in the hopes of trying to help out just music teachers in the state, help them get a better idea of what it's like to go to school to study composing, and then what else happens afterwards. So give them some more insight into this situation. So let's dive right in here. So good morning, Jake. Good to see you. We've been talking for a bit before. And so we're going to start with a few questions I have here written out for Jake, and we're going to begin with asking him what was his early music training like before high school, middle school, and there's a couple questions here that Jake might want to kind of combine into a few. So if he does, we'll just kind of we'll make it go. So it's up to however it goes. So
just let me go.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, good morning, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. So as for my earliest I guess, musical training. Like I started by playing piano, like when I was maybe 8 or 9, so a little bit before middle school, and I liked it. Like it was definitely and remains to this day like my primary and favorite instrument to play. I enjoyed it a lot, and honestly, like right from the like not to be super dramatic, but like right from the first time we got my piano, like I was always interested in composing. Like I was writing, pressing buttons on the keyboard before I even knew what the note names were. And I always liked, playing whatever I wanted more than practicing. But I don't know how many 8 or 9 year old kids like practicing to begin with. But so I started out with that, with piano, and I was in piano lessons all through, like, for quite a while. Like I stopped and then got a new teacher in like high school, but that's doesn't really matter. And then in middle school, I started playing trumpet in our school's band, and I liked that well enough too. But I had already learned, a lot of the most basic things. Like I already knew what a quarter note was going into it, so it's like I was always a little bit like my piano training had already prepared me for a lot of the musical training, so it was always like a year ahead, if that sort of makes sense. Like when we were learning like different 16th note patterns in middle school, like I already kind of knew what those were, so I was, I don't know, a little bit ahead of the game, I think. But that's not, I don't know how relevant that is, but the point is, yeah, I played trumpet and I liked it, but I always liked piano more, because my rationale back then was I didn't really like focusing on like tone and making a good sound. Like I just wanted to hit something and have it sound good. But of course I realized how immature that way of thinking is. But I was, immature back then, so it makes sense. And then and like all throughout this time, I really knew that I liked composing. I was using like a a very bad composing software very early on. It was honestly, it was like a website. It was called like Notissimo. It was wildly impractical. Like you just had to, like, there was like a sound bank at the bottom with like a bunch of instruments. Like you click on French horn and then you had to click and drag and like click every single individual note, and there was no shortcuts or anything like copy and paste or whatever. So it was insanely tedious. But I didn't realize how tedious it was at the time. I just thought like that's the only way to do it, and so I did it, like a lot of stuff. Like another important thing sort of in my career along the lines of wanting to play whatever I wanted is that I always loved playing my favorite songs by ear. Like I wanted to like I was obsessed with just trying to figure out the songs, like the pop songs or whatever. Like I liked a lot of rock and metal and stuff, so I was trying to play those on piano. And I got pretty good at it just because I wanted to, a lot of the stuff I was doing was kind of hard, so I figured it out like basically really just by ear. Like I would kind of know what these things sound like. Like I didn't know what solfege was, so I didn't really have like a language to describe it to myself, but I kind of knew what a 4 chord was and a 5 chord, so I could like sort of figure that out. But I didn't really like, I don't know, looking back on it, I don't know what my how I was thinking about it. But so it was a lot of that stuff. And then I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but once I hit high school, we had in Duxbury, we had a lot of music tech electives and stuff. And then I was introduced into Finale, which is, one of the main composing softwares on the market now for creating sheet music. And I sort of used that for a long time, and that got me into just sort of composing, quote unquote, for real. Like I writing like real band music. It's kind of funny because the only things I ever wrote before college for classical instruments were wind band pieces, because that's basically the only music I knew. It's like I liked my rock and metal stuff, and then I played trumpet in bands, so I knew like all the band pieces. Like I love John Mackey, Frank Kelly, all the big guys back then, because there was because both of those guys, their music is fast and crazy and kind of sounds like rock and metal, but that's beside the point. But the point is that I was, as soon as I got Finale, basically every single thing that I ever wrote was just wind band, because my I don't know, because my perspective on music, I guess, was not didn't really go beyond that. But that's not really like a bad thing. It's just kind of a quirky thing, I guess. Like it ended up being like a strength, I guess, just because it made me a better wind band composer, because I grew up and loved it.
Mm.
And to this day, it's still my sort of favorite genre to write for, I suppose.
Mm.
So do you want to ask more specific
Yeah.
questions, since I'm
Well,
getting ahead of myself?
you're doing fine. You're going well, all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to make the comment that, yeah, I see that a lot myself with the young composers, is that, they grow up in the wind band setting, and so they know wind band literature. And when they're trying to first venture into composing, that's what they're doing. They're writing what they know, which is the wind band stuff, or the rock and metal, whatever their thing is. So yeah, that's I see that a lot too. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
So
probably more pop and hip hop for the average student,
yeah.
which is just as fun. It's always a challenge to adapt different kinds of popular styles into more wind band settings, as many of these band directors listening to this probably know by listening to any of the arrangements of pop songs or movie soundtracks. It's like it's never quite perfect, but there are a lot of really good ones, don't get me wrong. But
Yeah.
it's a adaptation for sure, so it can be
So
interesting.
I want to go back about what first attracted you to composition, like what and what exactly, or if you could elaborate more, what was it about composing that you just really loved, that you decided to, like, no, this is, I just love to be a composer more than a piano player, or more than just a musician, or there's something about composing itself that just made you want to do it.
Yeah. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I understand.
I naturally gravitated towards, but like what I was sort of getting at, I don't know, I didn't really make it clear, but like I think since I was kind of, like I was saying, I was ahead of the curve when I was in band class. So like
Yeah.
a lot of like I was, simply speaking, I was kind of bored a lot of the times when we
Sure.
would
Yeah.
play the lessons in the morning. So I'd be like, and even in my piano, like the reason I ditched my first piano teacher was just because it was kind of boring, because
Yeah.
it was too easy. But that was basically because my technique wasn't on par with like my like musical maturity level. Like I
I
didn't
can understand.
like the music wasn't cool enough, but I was still learning like very simple things. So it wasn't like, does that make sense? Like there wasn't like really engaging music for a student, for a piano student that was not extremely
But
adept. So
could happen in any instrument where,
yeah,
the instrument
exactly.
you're playing, you're
So
still learning a basic song, but you want to play more interesting stuff on your own end. Yeah.
and then so what I'm saying is that maybe my thought back then was that like I should try to write stuff that I wanted to play, because I definitely did that. Like I wrote a lot of piano compositions early on just because I could play it, and then my scope expanded to the wind ensemble.
Yeah. That's great.
So
Yeah. So let's change a little bit now. And you talked about your experiences growing up, and then you played in the band program and trumpet and piano and all that. And then I guess let's just jump into you then went off to study composing first at Ithaca, right? So could you go into a little bit just about just the basics about what the program entailed, what classes you had to take, what you had to do to graduate, like what portfolios you had to write, just like very nuts and bolts of the program.
yeah. Well, we had to like I guess the biggest thing for the composition portfolio was like we had to write a bunch of pieces for different instrumentations. Like we had to have a piece that had strings, like a string quartet, for example. We had to write a chamber piece of mixed instrumentation. And we had to write a solo piece, whatever you wanted, whatever instrument you wanted. We had to write a solo piano piece. We had to write a large ensemble piece, whether that was, orchestra, wind ensemble, whatever. We had to write a song cycle for voice. So, the basic thing was just so you would have experience writing for basically every instrument. There was also like you had to have one that included electronics or fixed media. So I guess the point was, you had to demonstrate that you've written for every instrument and you've learned something. And whether or not that, well, never mind. But the point is, so that was the basics of the composition thing. Like we had to do that, and we wrote all those pieces over the course of 4 years. Like it wasn't really like that's the only thing. Those were definitely not the only pieces I wrote, but we had to at least cover those bases. And then we had, 4 years of composition lessons with like one-on-one. And then as for all the classes, we had, plenty of theory classes starting. So it started out very basic. Like I placed out of the first one just because it was very rudimentary, basically to make sure everyone's on the same page and they know very basic stuff. And there was also sight singing and like oral skills, they called it, which was sight singing and being able to internalize solfege and like being able to read things, which is needless to say a valuable skill for every musician. But like I was saying, how I liked playing songs by ear since I was very young. I was that's honestly I think I was very good at sight singing and transcribing, especially. Like that's a skill that I still do all the time. It's like I transcribe really crazy stuff. But and then other than that, like we had a film scoring class, which off the record wasn't as good as I would have hoped for, just because well, I don't know, the teacher was kind of well, I don't know. I don't want to, because like I guess we've already talked about it, so I shouldn't call anyone out. But I wish there was like I would have a lot to say about what I would have liked differently about a college program, but there was a lot of different classes. So there was a bunch of theory, bunch of history, bunch of sight singing, like I said, and then there was a bunch of various electives like electroacoustic music, choral arranging, like arranging for chorus. There was some orchestration stuff for composers, which was cool. And there was like, what else do we have to do? Like we had to do conducting, which I loved. I thought that was such a valuable skill for composers. There's a lot of like crossover, especially in history, of like conductors that are also composers and composers that are also conductors, because one of the most important skills for both of those people is just knowing a lot of music and knowing what goes into all those kinds of music. So that it makes sense. There's a lot of crossover. So I think one of the things that benefited me the most for my college, or I guess the thing that prepared me the most for college in high school, was the various kinds of music electives that we had at my school. Like we had a lot of music tech stuff that was extremely helpful, not to mention a ton of fun. Like it was super popular. Even I think a lot of non-musicians took it too. Like they weren't even in band. It was pretty accessible too. And because I'm sure, especially nowadays, there are a lot of people that would be super into, making beats and stuff. So I'm sure that'd be a ton of fun. And then there was also a music theory class in high school that was very helpful and very fun. And then eventually I also took chorus too. So I think, the point is to have as much available as possible. And also, I mean, the most important thing for me in high school was getting your music played, definitely. Like eventually I had one of my wind ensemble pieces played by Duxbury, which was you know, I can't overstate how grateful and how how impactful that experience was, just because it was so fun to have, you know, because I knew all those kids because I was a senior. So it was like all my friends were playing this band piece that I wrote. And then honestly, to this day, that piece is still one of my best. Like, I don't know if it was a fluke or whatever, but like, I wrote that like 8 years ago now. And it's still one of my most fun pieces. And it was so hard and they did such a good job.
Yeah.
And I learned so much because, there's something about like your friends, like when your friends play your music, they're not afraid to say like, Jake, this trombone part is stupid. Like, it's so hard. Like, we can't play this. And I'm like, oh, geez, that's helpful to know. Or like, it's because, if you don't play the flute, then like, I don't realize that, the low, like middle C to C sharp, that trill is basically impossible. Like, you don't learn those kinds of things if you don't, have that experience. But that's not, extremely important, but it's still fun. So I think one of the most important things that an educator could do for, someone they think might be interested in composition, or even like maybe they could do that in band classes in general, is like have like, you could split them up into groups of like 4 students or whatever, and then they write like a quartet for them and their friends or whatever. And because it wouldn't, because I think that would be more exciting for them. Like, they could, let's come up with something super cool. And like, they don't even have to write it down necessarily. Cause like, I think a lot of students naturally would get very overwhelmed. Be like, how do you write music? Because it's daunting, because you can literally do anything. But I don't know. I think that could be kind of exciting for especially like high school level. Because they're probably like at that point, like they know enough basic stuff to be able to put something together. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, no, that's good. I was going to ask you if you could, just to recap. So, like, your experiences in your musical training in Ithaca, you said it involved a lot of theory, history class, a lot of oral skills, dictation, things like that. It was a whole bunch of just general music classes around theory and such, kind of gearing you towards arranging, of course, and electives around different styles of music, all kind of gearing up to doing your portfolio, which is those large ensemble pieces. So you wrote those over the course of those few years, gearing up for that. So that kind of sums up the program that you experienced at Ithaca, and which is great. And then so kind of going back to your high school days to kind of think about what prepared you best for that was, of course, the performances in band, but also singing in choir helped out. Having more experiences in that, your oral skills, having your experiences, transcribing the music that you did in your early days, your early rock and metal days, the transcription stuff, helped your ear to train your ear to be able to get into dictation, into the composing world. I heard you say really helps you. And then taking the tech class where you could be able to write your own music and learn and just have the experience of writing your own stuff in high school was helpful to your experiences being in the undergraduate program. So those are all good things for educators to know, to have, students, like I said, play in where groups they can play in, so they get the musical experience, and have them sing in chorus to get their ear training so they can understand, the dictation and the oral skills, and then to get in the experiences in using the technology and composing and whatnot. These are all things that you said. I want to kind of reiterate for the teachers. Yep. And then you also said that you had one of your great experiences was having your own piece performed by a group in high school. And so I can imagine that was a great experience for you. Having at that young age, having a group play your own music. I wondered if you could elaborate further, on the real technical stuff as a composer that you found, that you learned, or that you had to do to, at an early age, write a piece of music for a high school group, and the experience of writing it and them playing it, and what you learned, and even if it's really technical composing stuff, what you found to be that experience was like.
Yeah. Well, I guess I should say that the piece that Duxbury played was not my first wind ensemble piece ever.
Yeah,
So like I wrote, I don't know how many, but I definitely finished 3 that were all not even close to as good as the piece that they played.
mm, yeah,
Like that, I learned a lot from my earlier pieces. Like they were just simply not so like I had to have the experience of writing a couple things before
sure.
I kind of arrived at a piece that was like, all right, I think this would really benefit from having this played, but I didn't really know that at the time. But
But you had a
that's
couple
yeah,
pieces written
so
first that you had
yeah,
to learn from before you got to the one that you were gonna
yeah,
be okay. Let's,
yeah. Like I kind of just like learned more in terms of like composition chops. Like I just kind of like my skills were better and at I don't know, like I was doing a lot of weird things like writing like tuba and bassoon lines like at the same register that were not uh the same, like they were both different, so they were like clashed on top of each other, and I was like, why would I do that? But
yeah,
it does,
just
it's
learning.
yeah, exactly. So but then my the piece that I did get played, it was called An Experiment, because that was my first piece where I tried to mash my love of rock and metal together with my love of wind band music, and it actually worked pretty well. And it it's kind of a relatively unique piece, I think. But yeah, like there, like I learned a lot from kind of elaborating. Like I learned a lot because some of the different parts of it were and by parts I mean like the trombone part was much easier than the some of the other parts. Like the trumpet part was really hard, which is I knew like I said, I played the trumpet, so I knew that, but I also knew that we had really good trumpet players, so I could afford to write a crazy trumpet one part, which they nailed. And I knew like one of our percussionists was like crazy drummer, so like I had a cool drum set part in it. And
So certain parts you wrote for specific players you knew that
yeah,
you were
because
playing
like I
for.
said, yeah, like I knew pretty much everyone in that band, like more or less. Like some of them were my really good friends, and like I said, that trombone part was not a story I made up. That's what happened.
Yeah,
Like one of my best friends was first chair in trombone, and he's like, "We can't play this glissando at all. Like it doesn't work." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I didn't know that because
yeah,
I don't know how it works." Like I thought trombone could just bliss wherever they wanted, but that's not the case. So I learned a lot about the various limitations on each of the instruments. But I think they got something out of it too, because like my piece had changed time signature like basically every single measure. So like there was a lot of like crazy counting to do, and but
yeah.
still think they had fun. But
So so I heard like I hear that happens too with a lot of composers. Or maybe I don't know if you had the experience in high school, college, where you got to write a piece, but you could you write a piece for a player, a specific player. You know
oh
what
yeah,
that
that's
player is
very
good
common.
for. That
Hmm.
common?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very common.
So sometimes I find that students feel that they got to write this piece and they have the BSO in mind or they have this young group in mind, but they write everything as to what they think might happen. But a lot of times you write a piece for the player you're going to have. So if you have a great trumpet section, you can write a harder spot or not.
Yeah,
Um,
and I tend to think that gives the pieces much more personality. I
mm,
mean, literally, because it'll cater towards the personality of the player, but it's
yeah,
also not realistic if you're trying to create something that's like as marketable as possible to every single band that might not have a bassoon and certainly won't have a contrabass clarinet. Uh, so like if and yeah, like
yeah,
I also have to say I recognize the privilege of everything I'm saying, because like when I was saying, oh, those music tech classes were so helpful, it's like all that music software and hardware is unreasonably expensive at times. So it's but that's a separate issue. But the point is, yeah, like I think writing for like I said, if you have your friends in mind, it can inject a lot of personality and you can do a lot of different creative things.
yeah.
But that's not necessarily what you know, Alfred or Carl Fisher is looking for, if to try to get a piece that will sell to every single band across the country, because you know there are different kinds of ability levels. So you kind of have to make a more average kind of thing, which is why, you know, a lot of criticism of early band music is that it kind of sounds bland and not you know, incredibly, I don't
Yeah.
know, you know
Yeah.
what I mean.
No, so when you're, yeah, when you have a piece that's written for your generic, you know, grade 1, grade 2, grade
Yeah.
3 orchestra, band, chorus, you know, every piece is kind of at one level of that grade. And those grading levels are kind of dictated by the publishers. They say, okay, here's a grade level 2 piece. You can't have this range, that range. But when you don't have those confines as a composer and you're out just writing pieces in general, you can write for, you know, the player that you know. When you write a piece like now, if you're writing a piece, you know, I mean, aside from a commission, which may have a specific requirement to it, if you're just writing your own piece, do you write with a player in mind, or do you just write for like a great player, or do you write it easier? I mean, how do you decide how hard to write a piece when it comes down to just writing something?
Well, I don't know. A lot of my it's funny, like I'm a very like polarized composer, where it's like my music is either like sixth grade band music or music that some of the best players in the world struggle to play. Like I write like, so I write a lot of music that's like really difficult, and I acknowledge that and
Mhm.
kind of roll with that and use that to my advantage. But I also write a lot of easier music that's different in that way. So I don't know. I mean, the short answer to that question is it depends.
Yeah, which is fine. It's just fine. You know, some quick questions here. All right. So the experience of having your music played in high school by your friends and the feedback that they gave you about your piece, and just the learning of what that experience was helpful for you. Do
Definitely.
do you think, going on to the kind of the next
And
question
just
over here?
and actually just like a last like 2 sentence thing, it certainly doesn't have to be a wind ensemble piece for that experience to happen. Like I said, like even if you know, for other wind ensemble like educators, I mean, like you could, I don't know, I'm not an educator myself, but I think it'd be kind of fun to have maybe like split them up into quartets or something and have them write their own music. I mean, I don't know how that would work logistically, like, you know, because having a million quartets writing music in the band room would not really work well, but you know what I mean.
So
So
having
my point is, it doesn't have to be a wind ensemble for that experience to be meaningful at all. It can just be, you know, a couple of your friends just jamming or whatever.
actually, I kind of go along with that. And maybe you could address this too, as I've heard that sometimes when you're having young composers, it's better for them to write for a smaller group for one or two instruments, because you know, sometimes a young composer composing for a full wind ensemble is a bit daunting to have so many instruments. But I've heard you know, composer educators saying, you know, just starting out small, writing for a solo performer or writing for a small trio, duet, quartet, what have you. It's composing, it's a good experience, and it's not as daunting as writing for a huge group all at once. Is that something that
Yeah, I mean,
you think?
it's definitely daunting to and it can be daunting at least to write for a, you know, a bunch of different instruments, especially if, you know, if the student doesn't play all of the, like I imagine it's would definitely be a personality thing, where some students would be very excited by that and some would be like way too nervous to write anything that was too scary. Because I forgot about that. That was like, while I was writing that piece, I was definitely having the fact that, like, you know, my friends were playing it in mind. It's like, oh, I can't write that because Abby will get so mad at me, or like I can't write that, or Tyler will hate me. So like that sort of peer pressure was definitely a thing in my piece. But the point is, yeah, that's definitely daunting, and it also just makes more practical sense to write a duo or whatever than write a piece for 40 musicians, like a wind ensemble piece or whatever. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I guess that makes sense. But I mean, if a student is really like, I really want to write something like that, and then I mean, there's no reason to limit their creativity. I mean,
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Good point. Um, So is there, going back to your training, then is there anything that, any classes or experiences or education you had in your undergraduate program that you kind of thought to yourself, it would have been helpful to have that experience earlier? Like, is there anything you could suggest to high school teachers to say, if you have a composing student and they're going to go on to study composition, this would have been helpful to them that I didn't have it, or I think these are some things that they could do, or just in general, we don't even have to specify it to a high school teacher. But the question, if I had experienced this or learned this before I went into my college program, it would have helped me in this way. Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had such a I think I had a really good musical upbringing at Duxbury High School.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of what that question for me would be like, what happened that I think prepared me the most, I guess, like, because there weren't a lot of, because the short answer is that there weren't a lot of things that like happened to me that I was like, man, I wish I knew this earlier. It's more of like, man, thank God I knew this, or like, thank God I learned this earlier, because I had
Okay.
theory lessons already and stuff like that. Like I remember even like in one of our lessons one time, like, I don't know, my junior year maybe, you like let me borrow like the Principles of Orchestration by Rimsky-Korsakov that I just shredded through, because I had never seen like a range chart before. It's like, these are all the notes a clarinet could play. I was like, oh my god, that makes so much sense. Like I didn't know that there was a thing like that existed. And then so I think something like that is definitely helpful, because I mean, so maybe that's something like you could, like a music educator could print out for their students as like I think pretty much every orchestration book has like a little range chart, so you can see like, these are the notes a clarinet could play, by the, like, in case you didn't know, like so like, if you just, so a student knows, like, if you're way up above the staff, then clarinets, like, you're getting pretty high, but if you're way below, then it's going to sound low and breathy. So just something to keep in mind. But
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
So having the
but
experiences of playing
yeah,
of
and again, I think the most important thing was just the experience of having your music played, no matter what it was,
Mhm.
because I think that's really where you learn the most. It's like, those are the experiences that are the most rewarding, intellectually and socially, if it's your friends playing it. But definitely the music tech stuff was helpful, because like I learned a lot about production and stuff that has definitely proved useful. But I mean, those are all things that you can, a capable musician can pick up pretty quickly, especially at the college level. So I think basic, I guess, to summarize your question, I think basic theory things like knowing what chords are, and like solfege and stuff like that would be very helpful to
Mhm.
have a language to talk about music. And then the experiences of having your music played, and maybe like as a cherry on top, like some technical and production skills would be cool too, depending on what the student is interested in.
Nice. A couple quick kind of follow up thoughts. I have two things I wanted to follow up on with these things. I guess talking about the tech stuff first. What programs do you use? I guess as a composer, what are your go-to programs that you use or have used?
Well, right now I use Logic, but in high school we used Cubase.
Yeah.
So or GarageBand, which is which has come a long way since I was in high school. Like GarageBand is super powerful now. Like it's basically just Logic light.
Hmm.
So I mean, certainly, like a high school student really doesn't need more than GarageBand. Like it's not as nearly as limiting as it used to be. Like you can do a lot of really awesome stuff with that. And
Hmm.
but Logic is like kind of more professional. Like there's a lot more stuff. And then I use Sibelius
Good.
for my composing. It doesn't really matter. Like a lot of people freak out over Sibelius versus Finale versus Dorico, but like I really couldn't care less. Like it's just the one that you're most comfortable using.
Good.
And then
Yep.
I also I use a lot of Contact, like sound libraries and stuff for my uh, like mock-ups and stuff for film scoring or whatever. Just writing for fun. And like there's a lot of like I think we use Sample Tank a lot in music tech, which I adored back then because there was just a lot of fun sounds. Like it was super inspiring. Like it's like a lot of those sound libraries are like the greatest antidote to writer's block ever because you can just scroll through and find like a really cool sound or like, oh, I could do something like that.
Yeah.
So
In your composing, you're composing with Sibelius, and you're doing sounds. Do you use the sounds in Sibelius, or you route them out to Contact sounds?
there's yeah, you can use, no, I don't run it through Context. That'd be a lot that'd be a lot
Yeah.
of like processing power and it's not really necessary. I There's this thing called Note Performer, which is like I think it's like $100 or whatever, and it's
Yeah.
like the best thing ever for MIDI realization because it's so good, really. Because MIDI is so bad, like it. This is like a whole just different discussion that a lot of composers like. Well, the MIDI can play anything. Like when I write it down, like the playback will play whatever crazy notes I put in there, but a real human player can't actually play that.
Mm.
So the MIDI can lie to you and be, especially I don't know, detrimental at it for a younger composer. But I use this Note Performer thing, but that again, like the Contact libraries that are super expensive and Note Performer is kind of pretty expensive, so it's not necessary. But if you but it's definitely like takes it to the next level. But Sibelius sounds are reasonable for if you get Sibelius, and like Finale MIDI was fine too for me, like especially back then. Like it's definitely suitable, if not like a bit luxurious, to be honest. Like
Yeah. Yeah, I know I've heard some composers, like I know like Stephen Reich, for example, uses Finale, but he routes it through Reason for his sounds. And I know
it can get as complicated or as
Yeah.
simple as you want. Like it's pretty crazy, like especially when you get into like real film scoring, like people like it's crazy. It's all like the workflows and stuff. It can get mind boggling for sure.
I also wanted to go back and ask you a question real quick about the portfolio, your portfolio for college. You wrote these big pieces, you said large ensembles, quartets, solo works, things like that. Did you have to have all these pieces performed or recorded?
That was like, so the way that it worked is that every semester there was like 2 composition concerts, like specifically just for the composition department. This is at Ithaca.
Yeah. Yep.
And you had to have one piece on one of the concerts, like at least. So you have to get one performance per semester. But I guess it wasn't really a requirement that every one of the pieces in your portfolio got performed, because I don't think, I'm just thinking through my portfolio and I don't really think that was the case. But I get it. But we also had a senior recital, which is, we had to put on like an hour of our own music. So that usually exhausted most of the pieces in the recital. I mean, most of the pieces in the portfolio, because you needed an hour of music, which is, a good chunk of music for a student composer. So so we definitely had to have a lot of performances, but I guess specifically not necessarily the portfolio pieces.
So the portfolio, you had to write these pieces for the requirements for portfolio. You also had to have one concert, play one performance on one of the composing concerts once a year, and then put an hour-long recital of your own music at the end of the year.
Well, it was once a semester, so 2 times a year.
2 times a year.
So yeah, at least. So like, and I honestly think that's I think that was like too lenient. Like I if I was running a composition program, I would make them do it once every
just performing all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you, now, I guess the big question there is, and for educators, did you have to find your own players, organize them yourself, and do all the rehearsals?
Yes, and I think that's an important skill because
Mm.
you know nobody's going to play your music for you when you get out of school.
Mhm.
So it's also a good thing because then you'll have friends, hopefully, assuming your piece is good and they like it, then you'll have friends that down the road maybe we'll play your music again. Like that definitely happens. Like I have people that played like 4 of my pieces in Ithaca, and then you know, because I think that's one of the most important things about music school. Like I know we're talking about high school, but if we're talking about the college thing, like pretty much the most important, like by far the number one advice I would give to students, just to make as many friends as possible, especially for composers who are normally super introverted and you know, border on antisocial, and I am definitely one of those people. Um, so one of the most important things you can do is just get a bunch of people to play your music. So I sent like I had a wind ensemble piece played, and like I messaged like every single person in the music school on Facebook just to try to get anybody to play my pieces. And I mean it worked out, but it was exhausting for sure.
I think that's a huge skill that I think it's common in most composing programs that young composers getting into that vein don't quite think about. I think a lot of young composers and a lot of young teachers think about, okay, well, my students are going to go on to composition. They're going to, I think they understand they're going to learn the theory, they're going to learn the arranging, they're going to learn the composing, they're going to be able to required to write pieces. But I think somewhere in the back of their mind, they have this illusion that there's this you know, the school's wind ensemble or the school's orchestra or the school's choir is going to be the one playing all these student pieces, when that's not the case.
Yeah, that doesn't often happen. Like in
Yeah.
my I got my master's at Peabody
Yeah.
Conservatory, and they had student orchestra readings like once, or like I don't know, I think it was like those 2 orchestra readings and a wind ensemble reading, at least in normal like I don't really know because they were canceled because I did my master's degree mostly in the pandemic, so
Okay.
those kinds of things didn't happen, but they do happen extremely rarely. But you're right, most places you gotta, you know,
Yeah.
put on your own show.
So if you're a composer, part of the skill of being able to compose your own music, you know, after you've had the idea, you've composed it, you've arranged it, you've done the score and printed it out. A big part of learning how to be a composer is then finding the performers and putting on the concert too. So it's a big part of the spiel. So I think like you said was very accurate, that most composers are going to be fairly introverted and, you know, not very outgoing, but that's a skill you have to learn, is to be able to have a network of players that you could call up and say, hey, would you come play my piece? And, you know, a big part of what we do is that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also important is not just performers as much as, you know, also make friends with film students and people of all sorts that, you know, might need music down the road. So it's, you know, it's never like, I can't think of any situation where it's a bad thing to have a bunch of friends.
It's a great bit of advice. I definitely appreciate that. So what are you doing now as in your composer role? You have some commissions, I believe.
Yeah,
and
I'm working on a commission for one of my colleagues from Ithaca. You know, I guess that's a good segue because one of my friends, he played like 3 of my pieces and he really liked it, really liked those pieces. So he and he honestly, he wasn't even one of my best friends. Like I hadn't really talked to him at all since I graduated. And then, you know, 2 years later, he messaged me that he's a middle school teacher in New York, and he wanted to commission me to write a piece for his band because it would be a fun way for the kids to learn. And I was, you know, very honored, and I'm working on that right now. And I'm also, you know, working on a couple other miscellaneous pieces that I don't really have a you know, a performance set for, but you know, I'm working on a lot of little film score kind of demo reel stuff too. So
yeah, and you're looking for jobs in composing or wherever you can right now. You're out in the world.
I'm trying to get into the music publishing industry. because I think that makes a lot of sense for a composer as passionate about, you know, school band music as I am.
Yeah.
So, but,
Okay, so we're coming to the end here now. We got a little bit of a late start, so
yeah.
but got a few minutes left to kind of say a few things. And what I wanted to do now is I wanted to give you a little bit of time, Jake, to kind of advertise yourself and kind of just hawk your services kind of in the thing, put it on the recording here, where people can contact you and where they could find your stuff and where they could get your stuff from, how they can get a hold of you if they need to. And, just kind of like give some information about, if what you do and people looking to get.
Well, yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, composers, I think, are definitely tend to be versatile musicians. Like they'll kind of do whatever. And but I guess the best, like I would definitely be extremely open to any kind of commission of any variety. I mean, I've written so many small pieces for middle school bands, and like 2 of them were commissions, and they were both a ton of fun and wildly I think successful. And I'm working on my 3rd right now, and I think that's going to be a ton of fun too, because it's going to be like a celebratory kind of piece for their first concert after COVID, so it'll be great. And you can, like, I have a website, jocmusic.com, and you can find, like, I have a YouTube channel where I upload a lot of my transcriptions and all my music and stuff. Like on my website, you can find some of my wind ensemble works, like my piece Experiment definitely has a great recording up there if you want to check that out. And I'd be happy to, my email is jakeomusic@gmail.com, and you can, I'd be happy to talk to you about anything. You can shoot me any kind of question or anything.
So, so to recap, your website is jocmusic.com.
And then my email is jakeomusic@gmail, because, jocmusic@gmail was taken, unfortunately.
And so, but you're in the area now. You're in Plymouth currently, right?
Yep.
So, until you find a job, which may take you out.
Yeah, but I'm Massachusetts based right now, and
So you're in Plymouth, and so you're available to for teachers if you want to contact Jake by email for.
Yeah, that's true. I've done a lot of sort of little clinics. Like I've been a clinician sort of thing, like just going around talking to students about my music and also composing in general, like what it's like to be a composer. Because I think like I said, I think it could be a daunting thing. Like a lot of kids are like, man, how do you do that? But it's one of those things where it's like, hey, you can do it too. You just gotta simply do it. And easier said than done.
But Jake is around, and so for questions or further emails or considerations for commissions or just for clinics or for whatever you need, he's here. And so he's a great composer. Check out his website, check out his music. Not only is he here helping us out by answering some questions about his experiences, so we could turn that around and help our students who want to go into composing. Also want to help Jake out if if anyone has any need for any composer services. He's someone who's here and local and can be a resource for all of us. So that's a huge help to have. We didn't get into much discussion about his experiences in his graduate program at Peabody, but if you ever wanted to email him any questions about that, you could too. And check out his email and send him an email and check out his website. And yeah, he's here to help, and I'm going to be utilizing him myself, especially in the Southeast District. He's going to be our clinician for our Young Composers Clinic, which is going to be happening in January. And then we'll see if we can utilize Jake any more in the future, going ahead with whatever plans the state might have for professional development. We'll bring him back for talks and discussions. We'll utilize him as much as we can while he's in the area. So with that said, we're at the end. So I just wanted to thank Jake so much for joining us this morning. To those people, I guess first to those people who were trying to get into the session today and had the issue with the with a link. I am sorry about that. Although, hopefully you can come back now and you're listening to this recording and you're able to get the information from this now. And if there's any questions that you wanted to ask specifically, you can email me. It's jpendaco@duxbury.cato.ma.us, or you can email Jake and we'll get back to you any questions about composing or preparing students for being composing majors or anything like that. So sorry about that link. And then again, thank you, Jake, so much.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure and an honor, and I hope I could be some help to, some teachers and students somewhere.
I think you were. I think this was a great discussion to have. I think you kind of enlightened us to a great number of things that can be helpful for teachers to help composers like yourself, students in their band classes that have this, or music classes that have this yearning to go on to study composing, and we're not quite sure how to support them. So thank you for all that. And
okay, well, thank you a lot.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you. And have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, Jake. Bye.